Hi guys, welcome back to my read along channel. This is Danny, the Champion of the World by Roald Dahl. Just to let you know, you might hear some different noises as I'm not quite at home, but it shouldn't interrupt the video too much. This is all Roald Dahl's own work. I'm just reading for entertainment and pleasure, so let's get going. Chapter 3, Cars, Kites and Fire Balloons. My father was a fine mechanic. People who lived miles away used to bring their cars to him for repair rather than take them to a nearest garage. He loved engines. "A petrol engine is sheer magic," he said to me once. "Just imagine being able to take 1,000 different bits of metal, and if you fit them all together in a certain way, and then if you feed them a little oil and petrol, and you press a little switch, suddenly those bits of metal will all come to life, and they will purr and hum and roar, and they will make the wheels of a motor car go whizzing around at fantastic speeds. It was inevitable that I, too, should fall in love with engines and cars. Don't forget that even before I could walk, the workshop had been my playroom, for where else could my father have put me so that he could keep an eye on me all day long? My toys were the greasy cogs and springs and pistons that lay around all over the place, and these, I can promise you, were far more fun to play with than most of the plastic stuff children are given these days. So almost from birth I began training to be a mechanic. But now that I was 5 years old, there was the problem of school to think about. It was the law that parents must send their children to school at the age of 5, and my father knew about this. We were in the workshop, I remember, on my 5th birthday, when the talk about school started. I was helping my father to fit a new brake linings to the rear of the wheel of a big Ford, when suddenly he said to me, "You know something interesting, Danny? You must be easily the best 5-year-old mechanic in the world." This was the greatest compliment he had ever paid me. I was enormously pleased. "You like this work, don't you?" he said. "All messing about with engines?" "I absolutely love it," I said. He turned and faced me and laid a hand gently on my shoulder. "I want to teach you to be a great mechanic," he said. "And when you grow up, I hope you'll become a famous designing engineer, a man who designs new and better engines for cars and aeroplanes. For that," he added, "you will need a really good education. But I don't want to send you to school quite yet. In another 2 years you'll have learned enough here with me to be able to take a small engine completely to pieces and put it together again all by yourself. After that you can go to school." You probably think my father was crazy trying to teach a young child to be an expert mechanic, but as a matter of fact he wasn't crazy at all. I learned fast, and I adored every moment of it. And luckily for us, nobody came knocking on the door to ask why I wasn't attending a school. So 2 more years went by, and at the age of 7, believe it or not, I really could take a small engine to pieces and put it together again. I mean properly to pieces, pistons and crankshaft and all. The time had come to start school. My school was in the nearest village 2 miles away. We didn't have a car of our own, we couldn't afford one, but the walk took only half an hour, and I didn't mind that in the least. My father came with me. He insisted on coming, and when the school ended at 4 in the afternoon, he was always there waiting to walk me home. And so life went on. The world I lived in consisted of only the filling station, the workshop, the caravan, the school, and of course the woods and the fields and streams and the countryside around. But I was never bored. It was impossible to be bored in my father's company. He was too sparky a man for that. Plots and plans and new ideas came flying off him like sparks from a grindstone. "There's a good wind today," he said one Saturday morning, "just right for flying a kite. Let's make a kite, Danny." So we made a kite. He showed me how to splice 4 thin sticks together in the shape of a star, with 2 more sticks across the middle to brace it. Then we cut off an old blue shirt of this and stretched the material across the framework of the kite. We added a long tail made of thread, with the little leftover pieces of the shirt tied at the intervals along it. We found a ball of string in the workshop, and he showed me how to attach the string to the framework so that the kite would be properly balanced in flight. Together we walked to the top of the hill and behind the filling station to release the kite. I found it hard to believe that this object, made only from a few sticks and a piece of old shirt, would actually fly. I held the string while my father held the kite, and the moment he let it go, it caught the wind and soared upward like a huge bird. "Let out some more, Danny," he cried. "Go on, as much as you like." Higher and higher soared the kite. Soon it was just a small blue dot dancing in the sky, miles above my head, and it was thrilling to stand there holding on to something that was so far away and so very much alive. This faraway thing was tugging and struggling on the end of a line like a big fish. Let's walk back to the caravan, my father said. So we walked down the hill again, with me holding the string and Kite still pulling fiercely on the other end. When we came to the caravan, we were careful not to get the string tangled in the apple tree, and we brought it all the way round to the front steps. Tie it to the steps, my father said. Will it stay up? I asked. It will if the wind doesn't drop, he said. The wind doesn't drop, and I will tell you something amazing. That kite stayed up there all through the night, and at breakfast time the next morning the small blue dot was still dancing and sweeping in the sky. After breakfast I hauled it down and hung it carefully against the wall in the workshop for another day. Not long after that, on a lovely still evening when there was no breath of wind anywhere, my father said to me, "This is just the right weather for a fire balloon. Let's make a fire balloon." He must have planned this one beforehand, because he had already bought the 4 big sheets of tissue paper and the plot of glue from Mr. Witten's bookshop in the village, and now, using only the paper, the glue, a pair of scissors, and a piece of thin wire, he made me a huge, magnificent fire balloon in less than 15 minutes. In the opening at the bottom he tied a ball of cotton wool, and we were ready to go. It was getting dark when we carried it outside into the field behind the caravan. We had with us a bottle of uh, methylated spirit and some matches. I held the balloon upright while my father crouched underneath it and carefully poured a little mess onto the ball of cotton wool. "Here goes," he said, putting a machine up to the cotton wool. "Hold the sides out as much as you can, Danny." A tall yellow flame leaped up from the ball of the cotton ball, and it went inside the balloon. "It'll catch on fire," I cried. "No, it won't," he said. "Watch." Between us we held the sides of the balloon out as much as possible to keep them away from the flame in the early stages, but soon the hot air filled the balloon, and the danger was over. "She's nearly ready," my father said. "Can you feel her floating?" "Yes," I said. "Yes, shall we let go?" "Not yet. Wait a bit longer. Wait until she's tugging to fly away." "She's tugging now," I said. "Right," he cried. "Let her go." Slowly, majestically, and in absolute silence, our wonderful balloon began to rise up into the night sky. "It flies!" I shouted, clapping my hands and jumping about. "It flies! It flies!" My father was nearly as excited as I was. "It's a beauty," he said. "This one's a real beauty. You never know when they're going to turn out until you fly them. Each one is different." Up and up it went, rising very fast now in the cool night air. It was like a magic fireball in the sky. "Will other people see it?" I asked. "I'm sure they will, Danny. It's high enough now for them to see it miles around." "What will they think it is, Dad?" "A flying saucer," my father said. "They'll probably call the police." A small breeze had taken hold of the balloon and was carrying it away in the direction of the village. "Let's follow it," my father said, "and with luck we'll find it when it comes down." We ran to the road. We ran along the road. We kept running. "She's coming down," my father shouted. "The flame's nearly gone out." We lost sight of it when the flame went out, but we guessed roughly which field it would be landing in, and we climbed over a gate and ran towards the place. For half an hour we searched the field in darkness, but we couldn't find our balloon. The next morning I went back alone to search again. I searched for 4 big fields before I found it. It was lying in the corner of a field that was full of black and white cows. The cows were all standing round it, staring at it with huge wet eyes, but they hadn't harmed it one bit. So I carried it home and hung it up alongside the kite against the wall in the workshop for another day. "You can fly the kite all by yourself any time you like," my father said, "but you must never fly the fire balloon unless I'm with you. It's extremely dangerous." "All right," I said. "Promise me you'll never try to fly it alone, Danny." "I promise," I said. Then there was a tree house which we built high up on the top of the big oak at the bottom of our field, and the bow and arrow. The bow, a 4 foot long ash sapling, and the arrows flighted with a tail of feathers of partridge and pheasant, and stilts that made 10 feet tall, and a boomerang that came back and fell at my feet nearly every time I threw it. And for my birthday there had been something that was more fun, perhaps, than the rest. For 2 days before my birthday I'd been forbidden to enter the workshop because my father was in there working on a secret, and on my birthday morning Out came an amazing machine made from 4 bicycle wheels and several large soap boxes. But this was no ordinary whizzer. It had a brake pedal, a steering wheel, a comfortable seat, and a strong front bumper to take the shock of the crash. I called it Sopo, and just about every day I would fill it up to the top. Oops, sorry, I lost my page a bit there. Where are we? I would take it up to the top of the hill in the field behind the filling station and come shooting down again at the incredible speeds, riding it like a bronco over the bumps. So you can see that being 8 years old and living with my father was a lot of fun, but I was impatient to be 9. I reckoned that being 9 would even be more fun than being 8. As it turned out, I was not altogether right about this. My 9th year was certainly more exciting than any of the others, but not all of it was exactly what you would call fun. My father's deep, dark secret. Chapter 4. Here I am, at the age of 9. This picture was made just before all the excitement started, and I didn't have a worry in the world. You will learn as you get older, just as I learned that autumn, that no father is perfect. Grown-ups are complicated creatures, full of quirks and secrets. Some have quirkier quirks and deeper secrets than others, but all of them, including one's own parents, have 2 or 3 private habits hidden under their sleeves that would probably make you gasp if you knew about them. The rest of this book is about a most private and secret habit my father had, and about the strange adventures it led us both into. It all started Saturday evening. It was the first Saturday of September. Around 6 o'clock, my father and I had supper together in the caravan as usual. Then I went to bed. My father told me a fine story and kissed me good night. I fell asleep. For some reason, I woke up again during the night. I lay still, listening for the sound of my father's breathing in the bunk above mine, but I could hear nothing. He wasn't there, I was certain of that. This meant that he had gone back to the workshop to finish a job. He often did that after he had tucked me in. I listened for the usual workshop sounds, the little clinking noises of metal against the metal or the tap of a hammer. They always comforted me tremendously, those noises in the night, because they told me my father was close at hand. But on this night no sound came from the workshop. The filling station was silent. I got out my bunk and found a box of matches by the sink. I struck one and I held it up to the funny old clock that hung on the wall above the kettle. It said 11:10. I went to the door of the caravan. "Dad," I said softly. "Dad, are you there?" No answer. There was a small wooden platform outside the caravan door, about 4 feet above the ground. I stood on the platform and gazed around me. "Dad," I called out, "where are you?" Still no answer. In pyjamas and bare feet, I went down the caravan steps and crossed over to the workshop. I switched on the light. The old car we had been working on through the day was still there, but not my father. I have already told you he did not have a car of his own, so there was no question of his having gone for a drive. He wouldn't have done that anyway. I was sure he would never willingly have left me alone in the filling station at night. In which case I thought he must have fainted suddenly from the awful illness, or fallen down and banged his head. I would need a light if I was going to find him. I took the torch from the bench in the workshop. I looked in the office. I went around and searched behind the office and behind the workshop. I ran down the field to the lavatory. It was empty. "Dad!" I shouted in the darkness. "Dad, where are you?" I ran back to the caravan. I shone the light into the bunk and made absolutely sure he wasn't there. He wasn't in his bunk. I stood in the dark caravan, and for the first time in my life I felt a touch of panic. The filling station was a long way from the nearest farmhouse. I took the blanket from my bunk and put it round my shoulders. Then I went out the caravan door and sat on the platform with my feet on the top of the ladder. There was a new moon in the sky, and across the road a big field lay pale and deserted in the moonlight. The sky was deathly. I don't know how long I was sat there. It may have been 1 hour. It could have been 2. But I never dozed off. I wanted to keep listening all the time. If I'd listened carefully, I might hear something that would tell me where he was. Then at last, from far away, I heard a faint tap-tap of footsteps on the road. The footsteps were coming closer and closer. Tap, 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 tap. Was it him, or was it somebody else? I sat still, watching the road. I couldn't see very far along it. It faded away into a misty moonlit darkness. Tap, 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 tap came the footsteps. Then out of the mist a figure appeared. It was him! I jumped down the steps and ran to the road to meet him. "Danny," he cried, "what on earth's the matter?" "I thought something awful had happened to you," I said. He took my hand in his and then walked me back to the caravan in silence. Then he tucked me into my bunk. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I should never have done it. But you don't usually wake up, do you? Where did you go, Dad?" "You must be tired out," he said. "I'm not a bit tired. Couldn't we have a lamp for a little while?" My father put a match to the wick of the lamp hanging from the ceiling, and the little yellow flame sprang up and filled the inside of the caravan with pale light. "How about a hot drink?" he said. "Yes, please." He lit the paraffin burner and put the kettle on the boil. "I've decided something," he said. "I'm going to let you in on the deepest, darkest secret of my whole life." I was sitting up in my bunk watching my father. "You asked me where I'd been. The truth is, I was up in Hazel's Wood." "Hazel's Wood!" I cried. "That's miles away." 6 miles and a half, my father said. "I know I shouldn't have gone, and I'm very sorry about it, but I had such a powerful yearning." His voice trailed away into nothingness. "Why would you want to go all the way up to Hazel's Wood?" I asked. He spooned cocoa powder and sugar into 2 mugs, doing it very slowly, and levelling each spoonful as though he were measuring medicine. "Do you know what's meant by poaching?" he asked. "Poaching? No, not really, no. It means going off into the woods in the dead of night and coming back with something for the pot. Poachers in other places poach all sorts of different things, but around here it's always pheasants." "You mean stealing them?" I said, aghast. "We don't look at it that way," my father said. "Poaching is an art. A great poacher is a great artist." "Is that what you were doing in Hazel's Wood, Dad? Poaching pheasants?" "I was practicing the art," he said. "The art of poaching." I was shocked. My father's a thief. The gentle, lovely man. I couldn't believe he would go creeping into the woods at night to pinch valuable birds belonging to someone else. "The kettle's boiling," I said. "Ah, so it is." He poured the water into the mugs and brought mine over to me. Then he fetched his own and sat at the end of my bunk. "Your granddad," he said, "my own dad, was magnificent and splendiferous poacher. It was he who taught me all about it. I caught the poaching fever from him when I was 10 years old, and I've never lost it since. Mind you, in those days just about every man in our village was out in the woods at night, poaching pheasants, and they did not only because they loved the sport, but because they needed food for their families. When I was a boy, times were bad for a lot of people in England. There were very little work to be had anywhere, and some families were literally starving. Yet, a few miles away in the rich man's woods, thousands of pheasants were being fed like kings twice a day. So can you blame my dad for going out occasionally and coming home with a bird or two for the family to eat?" "No," I said, "of course not. But we're not starving here, Dad. You've missed the point, Danny boy. You've missed the point. Poaching is such a fabulous and exciting sport that once you start doing it, it gets into your blood and you can't give up. Just imagine," he said, leaping off the bunk and waving his mug in the air. "Just imagine for a minute that you are all up alone up there in the dark wood, and the wood is full of keepers hiding behind trees and keepers of guns." "Guns!" I gasped. "They don't have guns." "All keepers have guns, Danny. It's for the vermin, mostly the foxes and stoats and weasels who go after the pheasants. But they will always take a pot at a poacher too if they spot him." "Dad, you're joking." "Not at all, but they only do it from behind, only when you're trying to escape. They like to pepper you in the legs about 50 yards. "They can't do that," I cried. "They could go to prison for shooting someone." "You could go to prison for poaching," my father said. There was a glint of sparkle in his eyes now that I had never seen before. "Many's the night when I was a boy, Danny, I've gone into the kitchen and seen my old man lying face down on the table and Mum standing over him digging the gunshot pellets out of his backside with a potato knife." "It's not true," I said, starting to laugh. "You don't believe me?" "Yes, I believe you." Towards the end he was covered in tiny little white scars. He looked exactly like it was snowing. "I don't know why I'm laughing," I said. "It's not funny, it's horrible." "Poacher's Bottom," they used to call it, my father said, "and there wasn't a man in the whole village who didn't have a bit of it one way or another. But my dad was champion. How's the cocoa?" "Fine, thank you. If you're hungry, we could have a midnight feast," he said. "Of course could we, Dad?" "Of course." My father got out the bread tin and the butter, cheese, and started making sandwiches. Let me tell you about this phony pheasant shooting business, he said. First of all, it's practiced only by the rich. Only by the very rich can afford to rear pheasants just for the fun of shooting them down when they grow up. These wealthy idiots spend huge sums of money every year buying baby pheasants from pheasant farms and rearing them in pens until they are big enough to be put out into the woods. In the woods, the young birds hang around like flocks of chickens. They are guarded by keepers and fed twice a day on the best corn until they're so fat they can hardly fly. Then beaters are hired to work through the woods, clapping their hands and making as much noise as they can to drive the half-tame pheasants towards the half-baked men and their guns. After that, it's bang, 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 and down they come. Would you like a strawberry jam on one of these? Yes, please, I said. One jam and one cheese. But, Dad, what? How do you actually catch the pheasants when you're poaching? Do you have a gun hidden away up there? A gun? He cried, disgusted. Real poachers don't shoot pheasants, Danny. Didn't didn't you know? You've got to fire the cat pistol up in those woods and the keepers will be on you. Then how do you do it? Ah, my father said, and the eyelids drooped over the eyes, veiled and secretive. He spread the strawberry jam thickly on a piece of bread, taking his time. These things are big secrets, he said, very big secrets indeed. But I reckon if my father could tell them to me, then maybe I can tell them to you. Would you like me to do that? Yes, I said. Tell me now. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop there today. I did a little bit of a longer one, but they were two quite long chapters, and I wanted to read a couple today, but it is half term, so why not? The next chapter will be chapter 5, and it's called The Secret Methods, and it's on page 35. So when we come back, we'll be on page 35. Thank you again so much for listening, guys. Until the next time, and have a nice half term until we read again. Bye, guys.